Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. This is episode 23? 23.
And I'm here in person.
And Maggie is here in person. This is a very special day on Other Minds and Hands, and the beginning of a very special weekend of Rings of Power and Rings and Realms activities. Yeah, so Maggie's here. That's the main
Yay! Guys, I'm like so beyond excited that I don't have to fend off my dog during this episode. The Wi-Fi's probably gonna, hold out. It's pretty great. So I'm pumped to be here in person.
Yeah, very exciting. So, so we're going to be doing Other Minds and Hands here, and of course we'll be interested in your questions as we go along as usual. And we're also going to have a special guest here today, which we'll introduce in a minute. So first, let's talk about what the next few days look like.
Yeah, let's talk about the plan.
There's a lot going on. So it's going to have a similar shape to what we normally do, but there's going to be some really fun stuff that we're doing. So we're doing Other Minds and Hands right now. Then later on tonight, we're going to be doing the watch party for the finale when that drops. Well, I was about to say like normal, except it's not going to be like normal.
Normal time, normal web address and all that, but it's going to be in here. And if we could turn the camera around, we would, but we're facing an army of sofas.
That's it. We have got this whole seating gallery set up here in the studio. So we're going to be live here. So you will be able to tune in and watch with us tonight. We'll have the chat going, and then afterwards, Maggie and I will be able to do some Q&A in front of the live audience, as well as taking some of your questions. So it's going to be a sort of a big event, which of course is also likely to be fairly late this evening.
We're hearing rumors that it's about 2 hours long.
Or less, but anyway, who knows? Yeah, there are all kinds of rumors swirling, but we'll see.
Things we can't control will be here anyway.
Exactly.
So then we're going to go get some sleep.
A little bit. And then we'll be back in the morning. So Maggie and I are going to be broadcasting our Twitter Spaces show on Friday afternoons like normal here. From here, that is. Well, no, it's not normal to do it from here. But
no, well, you won't see us. We'll be on our phones.
We'll
but we will be at StudioLab doing it here.
And then we're going to be filming the episode 8 of Rings and Realms all afternoon and evening tomorrow.
Which is going to be a bit of a change, because usually we have the weekend to kind of digest and sit with this, but hopefully...
Once before, we did an episode on Friday, but it's not been usual. But of course, the other thing that's going to make it unusual and even more fun is going to be having a live studio audience. So we're going to have a live studio audience for the last episode of Rings and Realms, which is going to be great fun. I think we're probably going to do some extra fun stuff.
Interactive-y things.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? I have all kinds of ideas, and of course waiting to see what actually happens in the episode to figure out.
Everybody's got their bingo cards ready.
Exactly.
It's going to be intense.
It is going to be intense. So that stuff's all happening tomorrow. So you'll be able to see the new episode of Rings and Realms, and wait till you see it. It's going to be awesome. All kinds of new stuff. But let us bring on our special guest.
Let's do it.
Because we have with us the linguistic Jedi here today.
I can't even look at him with a straight face.
James Tauber from the Digital Tolkien Project. Welcome. Oh, man, it is so good to have... thank you, James, for joining us today. Yeah.
There you go.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you.
You're welcome. So before we get into discussing the episodes, I wanted to talk just for a couple minutes about language stuff, because we've not talked much about languages during Rings and Realms to this point. So I wanted to kind of address some of this stuff. What are some of the things that you notice most in their, like, what's really jumped out at you in the first 7 episodes about their use of Tolkien's languages? Yeah,
so I mean, I want to start off by pointing out that Tolkien himself, in his writing, is always very careful to take would they know, what words would they know, and everything. And throughout Lord of the Rings, he does an amazing job of sort of shifting, dealing with socio-linguistic aspects of the different people in the scene and so on. And I really think the show has done a good job of taking those same sorts of things into account. One of the challenges, of course, in any television or film is what language do you speak? And you see it in films all the time,
and do they share it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you see all the time, for example, in Cold War thrillers when they're speaking Russian or something, you'll sometimes get a couple of lines of dialogue in Russian that's subtitled, and then they'll fall into English. And the assumption is, well, they're actually speaking Russian, but rather than continue to speak...
Have subtitles.
Yeah, exactly. We'll switch to English. And so a really important aspect of any kind of adaptation for the screen is what language is English representing. And of course, in the case of Lord of the Rings, English is almost always representing Westron or the common speech. And Tolkien himself talks about this. It's something that he describes as doing in Lord of the Rings, that when you see people speak in English, it's just his translation into English of what they're actually saying in Westron. If they're speaking the Rohirric language, then he'll translate it into Old English and so on. And of course, that's how he does his wonderful retcon of the Volispar names for the dwarves in The Hobbit. He uses the excuse of, oh, well, they have secret names. I've used the names that the men of the Dale would have used for them.
The commonly spoken.
But I'm representing that in Old Norse, and so that's sort of
to represent their linguistic relationship to the
exactly.
Acknowledging that.
Exactly. So coming back to Rings of Power, one of the really interesting things that initially disturbed me a little bit was that we were getting a decent amount of Quenya, but no common language that would have been spoken amongst the elves, at least. The Númenóreans had a bit of a split, which becomes important to to their story. The Númenóreans had their own language, Adonaic, although the nobility and then the intelligentsia ended up speaking Elvish as well, and that became sort of a bit of a split when the language got banned and so on. But in the Second Age, there was no Westron like we see in Lord of the Rings. And so the question is, well, what language are these characters actually speaking to one another? And of course, when Gil-galad and Elrond, for example, are speaking in Lindon, they probably would have spoken Sindarin.
Right.
And but that's just conveyed, represented in the show as English.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, why we don't hear it in Sindarin.
Right.
The reason that we don't hear much Sindarin in Rings of Power is because they're actually speaking it so much.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not that they're neglecting it.
Exactly.
We
It
hear the
counters
Quenya
that.
because that's what stands out among all of the probable Sindarin.
Exactly. So they choose, when they do speak a language other than English, it's always marked. It's always to indicate something unusual about the speech situation. And so it was really interesting that the bits of Sindarin that we got, other than, of course, names of places and people, because there's plenty of Sindarin names, but in terms of actual utterances of Sindarin, the only examples we've had so far are the conversations with horses.
With horses,
Right.
I was going to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
It's definitely horses that speak Sindarin.
That is our
It's the
conduit.
clearest thing, yes.
Yes, horses aren't allowed to speak Quenya.
No.
Or the good horses, maybe, but so we got Galadriel saying "Noralim, Noralim" to her horse, of course, mirroring Glorfindel in the books and Arwen in the Peter Jackson films, and then we also, when Elendil plays Horse Whisperer, he speaks Sindarin, Sindarin as well. So it's interesting that that's what they chose to use Sindarin for, and it explains why. Like, a lot of people had an issue with Quenya being used between Adar and Arondir early on. They speak Quenya to one another. But they only speak a little bit of Quenya. They actually speak English as well.
Which you assume is Sindarin.
They would have spoken, So I have a lot less of an issue with the lack of Sindarin now. Realize that they're actually paying a lot of attention to what languages are being spoken by the various parties. Yeah.
And what would, like, the Southlanders have been, because as you say, there's no Westron.
Right.
So what would we know about the language of the Southlanders? This is probably some of those unknown languages to which Tolkien ascribes some of the names of rivers and beacon hills and things like that.
To Westron. And in fact, even in Appendix F of Lord of the Rings, he does describe that the common speech emerged from the need of Númenóreans in Pelagia, which we heard in episode 7 mentioned, needing to speak with the Lowmen.
Right.
And so it's sort of the Westron emerged as a combination of the Adonaic language that the Númenóreans spoke and whatever the local language of the Lowmen was in that area too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And that's obviously, as you say, it's always a challenge in film. It's, whether you're going to do a dodge like the Universal Translator in Star Trek, right, or something else. But I mean, clearly the places where there is really rigorous about it, right? What are the elves speaking to the orcs? What are the Númenóreans speaking to Halbrand? When they're in private, because he wouldn't have known Adonaic,
Right.
Presumably, right? And they wouldn't have known whatever language he had. So I mean, there are some places where I'm like, too much realism is going to make it really difficult
Yes.
to have. To move
and
things
just in terms of like story too, I feel like there's so many different factors at play here that for us it's a fun game, but for the layperson it's a lot to keep up with. So if you also added subtitles to that throughout the entire episode, I think you'd lose a whole lot of people. So it's nice to have that perspective of like they've already made that decision.
The writing system, we haven't actually heard any Adonaic.
Right.
So they haven't invented that language.
I guess except for Ari and Zildune.
Yes, true. We get names, but in terms of
Actual
conversation,
yeah.
again, presumably because speakers of Adonaic would be represented as English.
As English, right? When we're getting the dining room scenes in Numenor and everything.
Yeah, but we do get a decent amount of a new writing system that was not developed by Tolkien. It was developed for the show in particular. That's really just a transliteration of English. They're not. It's not a writing system being applied to a different language. It's just the letters of the sounds of the English language being written in a different way. But you see a lot of it in the background. They've done a lot of work in the set decoration of incorporating this new writing system into Numenor.
And that kind of detail, I mean, I've seen so many pictures and stills on Twitter where people have zoomed in and trying to read Celebrimbor's, plans and stuff and seeing what the scrawl is in the margins.
Yeah.
That's the stuff that you want to get right because somebody will freeze frame that and zoom in. And if you do get it right, like all the credit is given.
Yep.
Brownie points.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
So so I think we have to acknowledge linguistically that there is, they're cutting some corners. It's not 100% realistic, and they have to do that. But I do think that if people can kind of get that sense of, okay, in any given scene, what language is English probably representing? Again, fudging in the case of people from totally different linguistic groups conversing with each other. But that I think that really does make things easier. It was, to me, the really puzzling thing at first. Like, why is everybody speaking Quenya? Like, that didn't make any sense.
Right, whereas, of course, in contrast, in, say, the Peter Jackson films, it made sense to have a lot more Sindarin because the default language was Westron.
It was Westron, right.
And so I think it's important to recognise that whenever you do hear something that's other than English, it's because it's an interesting linguistic situation.
Decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. As was
That's
most
really nice.
obvious, for instance, in the overheard Khuzdul conversation in episode 7,
Yes.
right, when Elrond responds to that. Yeah.
And how
exactly.
telling would that be, the fact that he knew some of that language?
Pretty significant.
That was a big
because
deal.
Not just everybody would
they
know
clocked
that.
it.
Yeah. I don't know what you guys think about this, but when King Durin compliments Elrond, I heard that as also a side jab at his son. Like, he's saying, so you have learned some of what you've been teaching him, Khuzdul, my son, without permission. Interesting to learn. Like, I think it's a jab at Prince Durin as well. That like, how did this guy learn?
Yeah.
Wait, I don't have to guess where this guy learned
this.
Khuzdul. I know who
Oh,
must
see, I
have
didn't
taught
even
it to
clock
him.
that, but that makes total sense. I took it as like, I'm not impressed by your little party trick.
Right.
Like you politician, that
Yeah.
means nothing to me. I didn't even think about it as a dig to Durin younger.
I think I think it's that too.
Yeah.
I think it's that too. But yeah, I do think that there's a like, I am acknowledging that I see what you've done.
Yeah.
It's not exactly chiding him or not exactly rebuking him, but I think it's potentially an implicit rebuke.
And also aligns when he says, I love him like a brother, as if he'd been fired in my mother's womb. That was not okay.
That blew the lid off.
Having that kind of alignment. So you can see that seed being sown with the language first.
Exactly.
Not being acceptable.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yep. So anyway, so that was the first Khuzdul we've heard in the show
Yes,
so
I
far.
believe
isn't
so,
it?
yeah.
I've been waiting for that. Though again, it's interesting with the whole English so again, presumably when we're getting those private conversations between Durin and Disa, English is Khuzdul at that point, right?
Yep.
So I wonder what language they're meant to have been speaking when Elrond is there. Do you think they're speaking Sindarin together?
I would imagine Sindarin.
Yeah,
that would make the most sense.
So the dwarves would be fluent in Sindarin?
Well, Durin and Disa, at least. Durin it would seem.
Yeah, I mean, there was enough interaction between dwarves and in Beleriand sometimes for good or worse,
Yeah.
with the elves that they would have spoken sooner. And,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's get back to episode 7.
Yeah.
Because there are a bunch of stuff that we didn't talk about. So in Rings and Realms, we didn't get to talk about Elendil and Isildur.
And Isildur.
That was one of the major omissions that I didn't have time to get around to. Of course, it was really funny in our live watch party, right? When like everyone was, we were discovering corpses and everything, and so of course we were all like, well, I like Isildur's chances of survival, and then a house falls on him, and we're like, well,
Oh, just kidding.
okay, didn't see that coming, right? But I mean, I still suspect he's going to survive.
You think?
Obviously.
Yeah.
I think you could be,
Shrewd
you could
theory.
put money on
I'm
that.
pretty
yeah.
sure he
I'm-
has a job to do later.
I know I'm
so,
going out on a limb there, but
yeah.
I think Isildur is not dead. But I thought that was so. There's several things that I found were really interesting about that whole. And the most obvious effect during episode 7 was the impact on Elendil, right? That Elendil, and you see the impact that his grief had on him. He's already kind of torn in two ways, right? He clearly has sympathies with the faithful. That's obvious, but he's not just like Isildur is fed up with Numenor, right? Considers the Numenor that he's grown up in not the real Numenor. That conversation with Galadriel was really interesting and really revealing. Elendil clearly does not feel that way, and I love that. I love how they are depicting Elendil's love for Numenor and his appreciation of, like, he genuinely loves
Yeah,
Numenor.
what was his line about the past is the past?
He says the past is dead.
The past is dead.
The past is dead, referring to the old ways.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He's a pragmatist. He's
He
kind of,
is.
this is where Numenor is at now,
Yeah.
and we've got to be loyal to that.
So at first, like in that conversation,
Yep.
I thought he was just being completely pragmatic, right? I want to protect my kids, and in order for like my family not to get in trouble and like my kids not to get arrested or whatever, or even just shunned, they need to. I'm trying. So I'm getting Isildur into the Sea Guard, right? They're getting working anyway to get Aarion into the guilds, right? So. That seemed to be just a keep your nose clean, do the right thing. In episode 5, I think it was, 5, when he's rebuking Isildur for doing lip service only to the traditions of this isle. I loved his line when Isildur says, I want to do something worthy of Numenor. And he says, and what would that be
Right.
in your words?
Yeah. Tell me the answer to that one.
I love that because he can, and Isildur couldn't articulate it, but
Yeah.
he can.
Yeah.
And he considers like being in the Sea Guard and being a member of the guilds and being one of the Queen's Guard and all of the like mainstream stuff. He seems not just to be giving lip service to that. Like he really cares.
Well, and
He
it
really
seems to be
believes
like
in
a
it.
really physical tie to himself as well. I mean, he was beyond homesick when they were in Middle Earth. He was very much like, get me back there right now because I don't feel good in this location. I need to go back to my homeland. So it felt like an actual like true connection to the earth.
Right. Right.
And then when his grief does pick up and you have that kind of effect, everything slowed down for him. And I thought that was a big
Yeah.
visual of like nothing worked. So he couldn't function anymore. He wasn't at home. He didn't have that to power up. He didn't have his son, couldn't have that to power up, and just shut down.
And the way that he then immediately turned around to blame Galadriel.
Yeah.
Right. And that if, wishing that he hadn't picked her up, off the raft, seeing his own role in this. I mean, it's an interesting almost inversion of Nori's perception, right? Where Nori perceives that this chance meeting happened for a reason and she doesn't know what it is, but there's this greater, but there's something she has to do, like Sam would say, right? Elendil was in that same kind of position, almost exactly the same, right? Coming across the unconscious people, right, in the raft. It's in the ocean instead of a crater, but very similar kind of chance meeting. And now he's resenting that, regretting that, and really questioning the whole thing. What kind of an impact is this going to have on his faithful status, right? His status among the faithful, his relationship with the elves and the elvish tradition. And of course, he's left before he's going to find out that Elendil was alive. So what impact it's going to have on
Isildur.
him and his Isildur.
Yeah.
What did I say? Elendil?
Elendil. It's
Yeah,
all right.
that's Elendil that I'm talking about. Yeah,
We got there.
before he finds out that Isildur is alive.
Yeah.
So I think his trajectory is clearly going to be complicated by this. I wonder what his now. Remember, he's going to be going back, and Eärion's there. Eärien, the full Pharazôn supporter, is going to be there. So it's going to be him and Eärien, who is already grieving, right? And now whose worst fears are going to be, almost worst fears. I mean, only 50% of them died instead of all of them, but one at least of her worst fears has been confirmed, which would seem to, set her in that way.
Yeah, I mean, I can't help but think of that scene where they, would cut between her in tears and Isildur with a smile and excitement on his face.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the last we saw of her.
Stark contrast.
So and now how is she going to be impacting Elendil, right? And how are they going to be feeding off each other, grieving now at home, and so I think that she is likely to be fairly instrumental in helping to push Elendil down, perhaps in a dark direction for a little while.
And a resentful one.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not going to be somewhere he willingly goes, and that's going to dig a deep scar.
And we saw his strong reaction to Muriel's oath to return, right? So I'm thinking that Elendil for a while is going to be pretty squarely in Pharazôn's camp, is what I expect. That'll shift again, right, down the road. But because remember, this is one of the things from the beginning that's so important to keep in mind for this show. Long trajectory. It's a long road to the end of the, he's going to get to the last alliance, but there's a long ways to go.
And I feel like there's been a lot done even in this first season. Like,
yes.
I often think, wow, they've put that in season 1. How much more can they do?
Yeah.
Whether it's Galadriel's shift or Elendil's shift, right? This is just the first shift that we're going to see. There's a lot more that can still happen to both characters. Yeah.
Well, and I think so much of that feeds into the pacing that we've been talking about too. Like each season has to have its own arc, but the whole series needs to have a single arc. So it's been nice to see. Like I really felt like there was a shift in this episode that everybody's arc really started taking off for the big arc.
Yeah.
Whereas the season arc, we've had a fair bit, but we just really have started the acceleration on the big arc for everybody on this one.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to be, but I'm bracing myself for Elendil to be like not quite an antagonist, but
Not supportive.
not supportive. Yeah.
What role do you think Anarion, the other son, will have in all of this?
So Anarion seems to be positioned, and I'm hoping we get Anarion in season 2. He's already in West Númenor, which is where the Conclave of the Faithful is, right? So I'm assuming he is going to be the voice of the 100%, dyed-in-the-wool faithful that we've not gotten.
Yeah.
I mean, Muriel's kind of in the closet, right? Elendil is even deeper in the closet, just having kind of, inclinations in that direction. Anarion is I think going to be the voice of the faithful in that way, which then, again, will be really interesting, especially if Elendil is trending in this direction, right?
That'd be really antagonistic.
Yeah. Really, and he already has some antagonism for
That's a good
Anarion, whom
dynamic.
he clearly feels was like deserting the family and their traditions, and even, in a sense, perhaps even betraying Númenor itself in some sense. It's, not like politically betraying it, like to its enemies or something like that, but sort of ideologically betraying Númenor. At least I was getting some of those vibes from Elendil when he was talking about Anarion in that very first dinner scene, which I need to go back and watch again because so much has happened since back in episode 3, I think it was, ages ago. So, but then meanwhile, Isildur, I've only just started thinking through the implications of Isildur remaining in Middle-earth.
Okay.
Right? So, he's likely to end up in Pelargir. I wonder if we're going to so one of the questions we've had about the chronology, the biggest challenge in we've squished everything into the end of the Second Age, which is fine, that can work. But the biggest chronological question was the time to build Minas Tirith and Minas Ithil and Osgiliath before the Last Alliance. If Numenor falls at the end of season 4, one possibility that we've discussed that I've suggested before, maybe there'll be a time gap between season 4 and season 5, right? The island falls, and Elendil and Isildur and Anarion end up, back in Middle Earth, and then season 5 we start. Some time has passed. They've built cities, right? So because we could, I don't know. You could skip a decade, maybe, and it would be okay. Wouldn't.
It depends how you handle it. I mean, I haven't been watching the what's it called, the Game of Thrones one, House of Dragons. I haven't been watching that, but there has been a lot of feedback on that about them skipping decades and people being really jarred by that. But if you handle it well, and we're talking about a compressed timeline anyway, and you come back in and establish this is what happened. I mean.
Right.
We have training montages that do the same thing. We're just going to do that over the course of a couple of decades.
And if it's between seasons, it's a little less jarring than if it happens between episodes.
Right.
Yeah. But if Isildur's already there, I wonder. There are Numenorians that are staying. Are they going to rebuild Pelargir? Are they going to move from there? Like, are we going to get actually the cities of Gondor beginning construction? Now, from season 2 through to season 4?
It would give Isildur something to do. It would really cut him off from the father, have that independence, find his own feet, and find his way to lead in this new world.
Right, he
with the
becomes
influence
a leader
of the old one. Yeah.
Especially since he wanted to escape from Numenor anyway, right? He'd be living his best life
and not
here.
under the shadow of his dad.
Or his brother.
Yeah, or
Anarion,
sister.
who's already, exactly.
Without those expectations.
Totally on his own.
I like that.
And again, it would begin to lay some of the foundations. And so I don't know. I'm not 100% convinced that that's going to happen, but I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, you don't lose much in terms of Isildur's storyline. The theft of the fruit is probably the only thing you would miss out as a result of that.
But he'd have to go back at some point, right? And there'd be time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so for instance, I could imagine. You're right. The big job that he has back in Numenor, he has 2 jobs. And I still insist. I will be so disappointed if I don't see Isildur hauling the Stone of Erech to the boat. I mean, he's got to bring the Stone of Erech. On board with his enormous 6-foot diameter pet rock. I absolutely insist. I'm gonna be writing JD and Patrick dirty letters if that.
This feels like a fan art competition. Like, we're going to make that happen for you, Corey. If it's not in the show.
It has to happen. Here comes Isildur rolling his boulder down the pier.
No, just carrying it on a little line, some wheels on a cart.
It on exactly. So good. Has to happen. But anyway.
Priorities.
But he could, for instance, Sauron could be there already. And things could be really going downhill fast in Numenor. And he could hear about it and go back to rescue his family or whatever, right? So, and then he'd be back in plenty of time to steal the fruit and whatever else, right? So he doesn't have to have been in Numenor the whole. There's no story reason why he has to have been there the whole time.
Right.
And with our comfort with relatively swift travel in this show, he can get back to Numenor, not a problem, right, later on. So, and again, who knows how many opportunities there will be for that kind of thing. At the very least, when the Numenorian army comes to overthrow Sauron and bring Sauron back, would be the opportunity for him to meet Elendil again and return with him. So I'm not too worried about that happening, about about him being able to be there for his one job, two jobs in Numenor. But I'm the independent Isildur arc.
That's a big deal.
I'm very much looking forward to that.
Well, because otherwise, as you said, there isn't much for him to do.
And
for 2 or 3 seasons.
And when you think about any kind of heroic archetype, they have to have that separation from the other. So we have this expected life that he's supposed to lead. He's not comfortable in it. He's already kind of chomping at the bit. We have now cut that tie. Now he has the independence to lead his own story, and we don't know what that is. We know what the end result is from the story, but won't it be fun to see this kind of growth?
Yeah. No, getting him out from under Elendil's shadow, I think, is a really fascinating thing. In some ways, the little incident with Isildur and Kemen, I was hoping we weren't going to get a whole lot more of that kind of thing. resulted in him getting on the ship and coming to Middle-earth, but like...
Because it felt goofy? Because
Well, no, I just mean like the...
convenient?
I don't know, it was kind of, I don't know, it was very like minor leagues for Isildur, right? I mean, like him stowing away on the boat and performing this small act of attempted heroism, which didn't work, to stop him, that is, followed by the more interesting and larger act of heroism of rescuing him despite the fact that it was his fault, Kemen's fault. But yeah, like what I didn't want is there to be this whole like Eärien, Kemen, Isildur running behind the scenes plot, you know, that's the thing that, I mean, I do believe we're going to get an Eärien and Kemen sort of behind the scenes plot. But exactly what Isildur's role in that, like, I say minor leagues, like I felt like for him to be just like relegated to that kind of plot would not have seemed to me to be moving him in the direction that ultimately he's going to need to be.
He needs his bigger arc.
He does need a bigger arc. And there's much more room in Middle-earth.
Yeah.
If he's going to be, because they all left. Miriel left, Elendil left, even Valandil left, right? So they've left soldiers, but who's in charge?
Right.
So there's a vacuum, right? A leadership vacuum, even among the Númenóreans. Not to mention a leadership vacuum in the Southlands. We have Bronwyn still, right? But to see like Bronwyn and Isildur and Arondir being the ones who are kind of now leading that, which again I suspect to be, I didn't see this coming when we were first meeting the Southlanders plot in the first few episodes. But now the move to Pelargir says to me like this is proto Gondor.
Right. Right.
Well, and we thought we were going to have Halbrand there as the new king and whatnot, so we thought he would be taking the reins and leading that, but no, he's got to go get some Elvish medicine. So
Apparently,
yeah,
yes.
so that does kind of remove that leader element.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So without Halbrand, no, you know, and let's hope that Halbrand returns to confront issues with his kingship, if not to take it up. I don't know what's going on there. I'm still holding out hope.
And explain some of our conspiracy theories.
Explain some of our conspiracy theories. But anyway, yeah, I think no matter how that comes out, Isildur's role would, because he wouldn't necessarily be like an obvious rival for Halbrand, right? Halbrand knew him. Remember there was that one moment when Isildur gets up in the apple eating scene, right, with him and the horse, right, which everybody really fixates on for some reason. I have to admit, I've not like really been upset by the apple scene.
No, that didn't really bother me.
Like, people,
throwing it away was a little obnoxious. Just eat it. Give it to the horse. But, you know,
but they
things that take you out of the story.
Anyway, it's not like he threw an untouched apple out into
We're
the
still
ocean.
talking about the apple.
Yeah.
I think people's issue was him eating it after the horse had taken
Oh,
it.
see, that I had no problem with. It was throwing away a perfectly good apple. Give it back to the horse. He'll eat it.
No, I mean like
That's wasteful.
I think there were a bunch of
It's a big boat. There's plenty of room for more apples.
yeah, and they'll be in Middle-earth in
We're
like 10
still
minutes.
talking about the
anyway,
dang
so,
apple, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, the horse, though. This is the thing I mentioned in Rings and Realms that I feel like it's just going to be an exact Aragorn moment. The horse has been set free. He's going to go find Isildur. He's going to ride back into...
They've set it up too much for them not to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're going to find each other. Yay, rescue. So
Yeah, and that's
I'm trying not to get distracted by it because it's not that big of a deal plot-wise, and it's a nice moment. But if you know the trilogy, the Jackson trilogy, so well, it's a little hard to separate that and not be like, oh, really? Okay.
yeah. I have felt that in the last couple episodes, episode 6 and 7, the links back to, especially 7, the links back to the Jackson films have become more obtrusive.
And a bit more obvious.
Yes.
They were very subtle. So yeah, I was talking about this in Rings and Realms where it's like, there's only a few that have really taken me out of the narrative.
Right.
But most of them came in this episode. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean the Elvish medicine
distracting.
line, right? There have been other lines, but when they've had other lines that they've taken from the film, they've not just like recycled them.
And they've made sense too.
They've made sense, or even they've recontextualized them in a way which was, I mean, like the salt pork line on the way into Moria, right? When Elrond's false confidence approaching Moria for the first time echoes Gimli's false confidence in the film. And I loved that because I felt they were practically trolling
Yeah.
Peter
Yeah,
Jackson
yeah.
in
Yeah.
that moment, right? Elrond's false confidence is so much better grounded. Gimli's false confidence is utterly mystifying.
Right.
Why on earth would he assume
Yeah.
that Balin was still in charge
Yeah.
in Moria? Certainly from a book standpoint, it makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, no one's heard from him in 30 years, and they're all presumed dead. And I get this question all the time. Why
would he think?
was he so surprised? And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me either. He shouldn't have been.
It's relieving.
So taking that false confidence and transferring it onto Elrond in a totally different context and for a totally different reason, I thought was very clever. It was very funny. But again, the he needs elvish medicine thing just
Note
seemed
for
like a
note.
forced parallel.
Yeah, and same with keen to the eyes of the elves when they're standing on the ship deck, and we heard that in Two Towers. So it's I don't mind that so much. I guess I'm
Right,
just
well,
going to
that
take a
one's-
deep breath and move along. 'Cause
That one's a direct Tolkien quote.
and it's pointing out
So-
a skill that is really amazing. So it's
Right.
quite nice to have those moments directly from Tolkien to be like,
Right.
we are incredibly gifted
Yeah.
people, and I can witness it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I was thinking, it made me think of the movie moment as well there, not just the fact that it's a Tolkien quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So we'll see what happens with the horse, but I think we can all agree that that's going to happen.
exactly.
Well, at least there's no one that Isildur could be dreaming of when the horse starts licking his face.
We're not going to have an Isildur and the horse makeout scene like we
Yeah.
almost got. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there some other subplot with Kemen that we don't know about?
Maybe Kemen, maybe.
That's right. Might have given him
There
mouth
was
to
a
mouth.
rescue, I'm just
I don't
saying.
know. Yeah. But I thought that's what he would be fantasizing about,
Right.
probably. Yeah.
Moving swiftly
Moving
on.
swiftly on. Yes, there we go. But yeah, I will be interested to see how. I mean, obviously, Beric is going to be instrumental in finding him and bringing him back. Given the Aragorn was just lost, right? I mean, he just washed up on the shore of the river, and Isildur was buried under rubble. I'm not sure it's going to be exactly the same, but. Yeah, I mean, it's clearly
Buried under burning rubble.
Yeah.
I am interested to see how did he escape that one, but they'll find a way.
Is Isildur going to be wounded? Is he going to have scars? Is he going to be, even like crippled in some way?
I was
It's possible.
What if they pull an amnesia storyline in here and he doesn't know that he's Isildur for many years?
Whoa.
I know. Just
Didn't
crossed
even
my
think of
mind.
that.
Just happened.
Whoa.
We'll see.
And he'd presumably find out, as there are other Númenóreans around.
Somebody would recognize him eventually, but not
Yeah.
if he's scarred and bandaged and everything else.
Yeah. Because I mean, we do know it's one of the things. Like he has plot protection from death
Right.
at this point.
But that's about it.
Only death.
Yeah.
I mean, he just has to be able to.
And we assume at the end he knows who he is.
Right.
Because we do have the father-son dynamic at the end as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do think that he. He could be. Him being scarred would be interesting. Would be interesting. I'm not sure. We'd have to totally unscathed.
Unscathed.
I swooned briefly, but I'm fine now, right?
I have a bit of soot on my cheek. Yeah.
Exactly.
It'll be a bit more than that.
Probably a bit more than that, but.
Do you think we'll find out in this episode?
Yes.
I think we will too. I mean, we have to know some sort of continuation for season 2, so
Yeah.
we'll have enough
Yeah.
comfort that he's okay.
Yep.
If only that he's alive.
Yeah, exactly.
If only that he's alive.
That his storyline is still at play.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think we may get him all the way to Pelargir. In fact, that may be the way we segue to Pelargir.
Yeah.
Bronwyn said they were gonna go to Pelargir, so I wouldn't be surprised to find them already there, and then it's
And then
Isildur
the
finds
horse,
them.
the
there.
horse shows
Shows
up
The horse
up.
shows up
with Isildur on.
with Isildur,
Draped
and
over his back.
that's like how we get introduced to the new digs at Pelargir.
That'd be a nice visual moment. You can hear the music swelling and Barrett coming over the hill.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was just checking the questions, and the only one I could really clock was, James, are you warm enough? Are
Is
you,
it
are you
obvious, is it?
sweating yet?
Is it obvious?
You can decloak if you need
can
to.
decloak.
Maybe I should.
Yeah.
It's time to see James Tauber uncloaked.
This is getting weird.
Come on. It's not like creepy when Gandalf uncloaks himself.
Yeah, it's not quite as impressive as
Yeah.
revealing myself to be Gandalf the White. But
Oh,
Right.
true.
Exactly.
well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tauber the Black.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, all right. What else happened in this episode?
Okay, so those are the two, the Elendil and Isildur trajectories
Yeah.
were two of the biggest things that I wanted to make sure that we covered.
And I just really still love the continuation of that relationship too. Like seeing his grief, Elendil's grief,
Yes.
is just setting up such a strong shift, and I really appreciate that relationship. It's making me, like we've talked about before, care about them,
Yeah.
because we haven't spent a lot of time with them. So the repeat of that relationship has been very nice.
And the reconciliation in episode 6 was really powerful.
Oh,
was
when
so well
that was
done.
so lovely.
The hug, that was
Yeah.
like one of the best father-son hugs I've seen in a long time.
And did you see that side by side? I saw some people taking from Jackson's trilogy the same shot right before he cuts off Sauron's hand. It's the inverse in this one, and I
Right.
thought that was lovely.
Yeah, yeah.
Foreshadow.
I really loved that. So anyway, yeah. So we've got that stuff. The creepy cultists. The two things, the two kind of vectors we got on that storyline into this episode, right? Were first their pursuit of the stranger, and secondly, their taking of the acorn off of Nori's head, right? Those seem to be the two, and then of course Nori and company following along behind them. Oh, by the way, James, I'd be wondering what you think about this theory. I was troubled by geography at the end of episode 7.
Okay.
I was troubled by geography because it seemed clear that the map sequence during the Wandering Day song was suggesting that they went down almost to the Black Gate
Yep.
and then cut east and were
Yes.
going straight east from there, so
Yes.
that where the grove was somewhere in like the northeast corner north of the mountains, still close to the mountains, but
Yep.
somewhere over there. And then Sadok is like, go this way, Greenwood the Great is right there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Greenwood the Great is hundreds of miles away from there. But I was talking about this at Middlemoot. And I have to give props to Eric from Middlemoot, who made the genius suggestion, which I became immediately convinced by, which is Greenwood the Great isn't there on the Third Age map, but in the Second Age, when the forests extended, when a squirrel could go from tree to tree, from Fangorn all the way to the Old Forest.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that the East Bight of Mirkwood
Yes.
is the result of deforestation by Rovanian,
Yeah.
right? So that entire realm of Rovanian, pre-Rovanian, isn't it possible that Greenwood the Great in fact extended through what would become
Of
the
course, a
entirety
millennia.
of Rovanian?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that they deforested it. So in fact, so the reason I'm looking at this map and saying, holy cow, Greenwood is really, really far away,
Not necessarily.
not then, perhaps.
The only thing that is unfortunate we didn't get is in the 2019 Amazon maps,
Right.
because in other respects they've given us lots of really interesting hints about things,
Yes.
and they certainly took into account the deforestation in Eriador,
Right,
in
in
South,
Eriador, from
in
the
the South
Menorians,
Eriador.
yeah.
I don't recall. The bite wasn't certainly the
Bite wasn't there,
the bite
yeah.
wasn't there, but I don't know that it extended much further. I like the theory, but it's just unfortunate that
With the map,
the
yeah.
map doesn't actually reflect that.
Yeah, exactly. That was, I mean, I've been in disbelief suspension mode when it comes to geography
Yeah.
fairly consistently, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine
Makes
with
it a
Helpful
lot
when you're
easier.
riding with sepsis. But,
yeah, exactly. Poor Halbrand is like, can we please make this journey
Move
a
this
little shorter?
along.
Yeah, exactly.
Portals?
Yeah. So yeah, I generally I've been fine with that. People have asked me, why do I hate the bunny sled so much in the Hobbit films when I don't seem to have any problem with this? And that's actually the answer. The answer is they tried to give a ridiculous explanation
Yeah.
for how they're if you just like have Gandalf riding off screen in the Shire and then approaching Orthanc apparently 15 minutes later, right? I'm willing to be like, okay,
I don't know how it
time
happened,
passed,
yeah.
whatever, it's fine. We're moving on, we're in Orthanc now. Like, I'm not going to be like, it would have taken him months to travel that, and therefore all these. It's fine, like whatever. But when you try to give me a super fast sled pulled by rabbits and be like, and that's why. Do you know how fast these can go? I'm like, that's when I'm
Don't
like, yeah.
give me the reason
Don't
to
explain.
be ridiculous.
Just don't explain.
Yeah.
Just don't explain, and I can make up a reason why
Right.
and pretend it makes sense.
But if you give me one and it's terrible,
yeah,
there will be
what-
mockery.
That's why I hate the bunny sled. But or just give me something like the utterly and completely hand wavy. But
But it works because of that.
It stands
That's the
in
rule.
for-
Which Doctor Who does all the time, right?
Yeah,
Right,
Just-
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. That's
Yeah.
what it's there
Yeah,
for.
and again, I'm fine with that. Like I've been given like the TARDIS is like a non-explanation for
Yeah.
travel, which is great, fine. But yeah, so I hope that Halbrand can suck it up with his septic wound for several weeks of
Oh,
hard
I'm
riding.
sure he can if he's a Maya.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
Back to the mystics
Back-
language. So I'm curious of
Yes.
your opinions on
Oh, the-
that, of
the
like
total silence. First of all,
complete and lack.
amazingly creepy. Like they are so much scarier. It's almost like they. It's almost like I'm sure they did. Read. I forget which letter it was. The famous Zimmerman script commentary letter from Tolkien's letters, in which he blasts the script for giving the Balrog lines.
Yes.
And Tolkien is like, don't they realize how much scarier the Balrog?
Yeah. Of like, wait, what are
Right.
they? Because it's
Right.
just there was no language, but they were still able to access the magic.
Yeah, it was interesting. And James, you could tell me if you've noticed anything that I hadn't noticed. But I was like on the set of Rings and Realms last time. I was like, is this right? Is this true? It's the only magic we've seen. The Stranger and the Mystics are doing the only. I don't think anywhere. I don't think any elf has done magic. Fireworks, arguably. The fireworks in Linden, maybe.
Yeah, we don't know how they were.
Yeah, we don't
done
know how
though.
it was
Can't
done.
think of any.
But with that possible exception of fireworks, I don't think we've seen anybody else doing magic. So it's
I don't think so.
Yeah.
just that plot line, which is another.
Well, and unless, the stranger healing the tree.
Right, exactly. No, yeah,
And the other-
the Stranger and
The
the
Stranger and the
Mystics.
Mystics.
exactly.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
they're the only ones
Yeah.
doing it, but the
Yeah.
elves haven't done anything.
So I think it's another reason why I'm thinking we're all like this is the wizard related subplot.
I remember in when I interviewed Leith McPherson, she brought up the word spell in the context of Elvish languages.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'm like, what do you mean teaching them Elvish words for the spells?
Right.
But now,
Now
we've
it
seen
makes
it,
sense.
especially
Yeah.
with the stranger.
With the Stranger, yeah. Madagot brings up the sword. Yes, the hilt, right, and the blade of the hilt.
Yeah.
That is magic. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. It's. I wasn't
But
counting
that's
that.
a powerful object. That's not
It is well, and it's.
And triggered by blood rather
right.
than language.
It was a
Right.
device.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question that several things about it: the incorporation of shadow,
Yeah, and
the
same-
use of blood.
And same with the Palantir. Like, there's something magical in that, but that's another object.
Yeah,
we're not seeing
that's an
people
artifact,
create.
especially. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I wouldn't count the Palantir. Certainly not as the kind of magic that I'm talking about. But first of all, can we just like take a step further back from that, and how impressive that is? That just as with the books, you can step back and say like, wait, is magic happening here? Does this count as magic? What is it? How does magic work? And the magical thing happens, right? Gandalf and his flaming pine cones, right, or something
Yeah.
like that, right? Gandalf with the wolves in the Fellowship of the Ring, and then you have other things where it's like, well, does this count? Is Miravor magical? Is Lembas magical? Is the Palantir magical? And how do you define that, right? The show has really accomplished a very similar thing, where magic there is a sense of wonder that is
Believability.
like magic, and yet, it's not. We have had no equivalent of like Saruman's fireball from the Peter Jackson extended cut in Isengard. The Peter Jackson folks decided to go like one step over the top and saying like, I want to make it obvious that there's and I always interpreted that as them being reluctant to take the risk, right? Like when Gandalf and Saruman confront each other, there is magic of a sort being used, right? There's power happening. It's a magical confrontation, even though nobody's beating on anybody else with sticks like the first time. But both times, the Peter Jackson team chose to make the confrontation between Saruman and Gandalf visible and outward, right? First with the relatively ridiculous fight, stick fight, but staff fight between the two of them. And then secondly, with the fireball, and Gandalf is impervious to the fireball, which is a clumsy way of externalizing and visualizing his attack through his voice, which Gandalf is impervious to.
Right.
Seen that, that kind of a clumsy visualization.
Trickery.
Yeah. Exactly. So it's really interesting to me. I think that they seem to have been very deliberate in trying to capture both like the general wonder and mystique of Middle-earth people in general, without actually having anybody casting spells.
Yeah,
at
and I
almost any
definitely like
point.
the subtlety of it, because it does make it seem like it just functions really well in that world. But I have missed seeing that higher level of the elves, because I don't think we've seen a lot of that. Keen are the eyes of the elves, and we have that whole scene about seeing the land earlier, but that felt a little like, oh yes, I've seen it for an hour, as opposed to
Just
actually
slightly smug there.
it was right up there with the show don't tell, though, too, of film. Like, don't tell me, show me something really cool so I get to kind of see that magic happening. So yeah, it walks the line, but sometimes I'm like, you can look over on this side because that part's really cool.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. But yeah, it's always the depiction of magic into, like, when you're reading Tolkien and talking about Tolkien, how Tolkien treats magic is a really complicated and interesting subject. And it's a real challenge for visual adaptation, because so much of the time when magic is happening, when it's not fireworks, when magic is happening, it's almost always invisible. I mean, rarely can you see it at all. And so, to depict, like, for instance, Gandalf and Denethor's gazes locked together. I was just talking with Alan about this on the Prancing Pony, that scene. I think that episode drops this Sunday, actually, but the actual meeting with Denethor. But anyway, that kind of thing, right? I mean, on screen, it's just going to be two people staring at each other,
right?
How do you convey to the audience, to the watching audience, that a magical, a confrontation of wills is happening? I'm not saying Denethor does magic, but that's the point. Like, where's the line? Where's the line between what Saruman does with his voice and his will, and what Denethor can do with his will? It's not a, this person can. It's not a wizard muggle situation. In Tolkien's world, it's just not.
Right.
And again, I think that they've done some interesting work, I think, in making magic sort of equally uncommon in its outward and obvious manifestations, but also kind of implicit. But anyway, yeah.
Like, how do we get there? Oh, mystics, not talking.
Mystics.
Yep, there
Mystics,
was our
not
path.
talking.
Magic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we're in our home stretch here. So let's think about episode 8.
Where we're going.
Where we're going.
First of all, we know they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. We talked about this a little bit last week, but we can talk about this even with more information this week than last week. And James, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this too. What are on your list of things that need to get resolved in season 1?
I mean, I think the most important thing has to be the fading of the elves, because there's been such urgency put into that, right?
Yeah.
The construction's got to happen by spring, and then we find out it's because it's all tied to the fading. So, I mean, that we need some resolution of that.
Yes.
Which I'm positive we'll get something.
Yes.
And we can talk a bit more about what we think that might be. I don't know if we'll get any more about Prince Durin, or no longer Prince Durin.
Right, former Prince Durin.
The artist formerly known as.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, that storyline feels like it would be okay if it didn't progress.
I think we
this
can leave it
episode.
that way.
I mean, I hope we get a little bit more, because I always want more Durin, but I feel like that is at a good place, that gives us enough strife in season
Yeah.
2 to know where he is in this moment.
And similarly, I think the Bronwyn Arondir side of things, I suspect we may see
I
them,
think we
but
need
I
to
don't.
see where they are.
But I don't think we need. There's no.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to see
Yeah.
like the setting up of camp and Isildur riding on the horse, because then we know those guys are okay and they're setting something up that gives us kind of a resting point before the next season.
Yeah. So I think the mystics and the stranger and the fading of the elves are the two things that we need to
Yeah.
hit
Yeah.
on strong in episode 8.
Agreed. Those for sure.
And what's happening back in Numenor? We assume Farazan's not up to any good or something along those lines.
Yeah, I can imagine a little bit of progress on that, a reminder,
Yeah.
but I don't know that maybe we'll just see murmurings of his attempted or beginnings of his
Or just kind of like the
usurping.
establishment of some unsettlement, because she's coming back now hindered as well without any eyesight, and clearly she's terrified of losing that ability, and that makes me wonder what that could mean for how handicaps is accepted in Numenor and things like that, if that's really going to be a big
Yeah.
hindrance to her ruling. But I think that would be enough to just kind of set up. Things aren't going to be shiny back in Numenor just yet.
Do you think they're going to use the blindness as part of the usurping
Freezing to unseat her.
rather than the forced marriage?
Yes.
Do you think we'll see a forced marriage, I guess?
I've been thinking about that, and I was assuming forced marriage, but now the blindness actually does make
Could
me think
facilitate that.
this could be basically that she could end up being set aside like her father.
I am not 100% sure of this, but I've got the funny feeling that the forced marriage is only in Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales and not in Appendix A and B. I think Appendix A and B just talk about him usurping the throne. They don't
Yes.
mention the marriage to
Right.
Muriel at
Yeah.
all. So
Yeah.
they
So
may
you don't need to include it.
they may just decide
Yeah.
to skip that altogether.
Well, and forced marriage of your first cousin is a little
Meh.
meh.
It's a little awkward.
Yeah, it's a little awkward.
awkward.
I mean, it's supposed to be awkward.
yeah,
Right,
and it's
yeah,
made
it's-
clear that they're defying both the Elvish law and
Yeah.
natural, the
And
laws
their
of the
tradition. So
Valar.
They
it's-
acknowledge that,
yes.
but
In
yeah.
the book, it's supposed to be creepy.
Right.
Right.
But
We can have the same outcome and find a different conduit if we
Yeah.
don't need to support that storyline potentially.
especially because here's the reason I bring that up. It's because of the trajectory they're giving to Farazan, right? Farazan is already on the highway to villainhood,
Right.
but I think they've clearly wanted to depict him in a way that at least helps us to, if not sympathize, at least understand his perspective and how it is that what he's doing he genuinely believes to be for the best for Numenor.
Right.
And if, the whole, I'm going to force my first cousin to marry me against her will, like, you've got the creepy black hat on from the beginning. Like, I think
Yeah.
Right,
the distancing.
That's
from
true.
the
There's
audience.
nothing he's done that seems entirely self-serving. It seems
Right.
he has
No.
a particular view of Numenor,
Yeah.
Yes.
and
yes.
he is.
And an agenda on how to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And
And
this
he's
might mean
clearly
that he doesn't
ambitious for
need
his
to do
own
that.
power in
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
But yeah, that there hasn't been a moment yet where he's done anything that really forces the audience to be like, ooh, yeah,
right.
no.
And that's not the vibe that I feel like we want to get from Matt.
Right.
I don't want to be creeped out by him. We want to be like concerned about his hunger for power.
And remember that, of course, he's completely anti-Sauron at first.
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
He's ambitious. He wants to be
Yeah.
Right.
ruler of Middle-earth as well as Numenor.
And he's also
but he sees Sauron as a threat to that.
And he's also completely loyal, my queen,
Yes.
very
Yes.
serving to her. So
Yeah.
you feel nothing but loyalty, and then you start to see these sowed seeds of just power hungry. I don't think about him as creepy.
Yeah.
Right, and this is exactly what happens when you go. Like, our Farazan's story is how many pages in the Akalabeth? Like
Right.
the whole thing is just a couple pages. So yes, it's like to give a clear signal at the beginning of his story. It's the first thing we hear of him, right? Tar Palantir dies, and he comes in and he forces Muriel and usurps the throne, and there we go. And so that's the signal to where his. But again, he has no arc. It's
Right.
Yeah.
it's a single thing. He is himself a small piece in the overall arc of Numenor, which is the perspective from which we're getting the Akalabeth, for instance.
Right.
And I know that's not in the appendices, but still, if we're just sort of thinking about that fuller, it's the fullest story we have of it, right? But even there, so now we're going to be giving him a whole arc on its own, and so to have that arc, it wouldn't be the beginning of it, but still be fairly close to the beginning, presumably. It would be, I'm not sure it would strike quite the same, the right note. So for this reason, I give the forced marriage about 25%.
Yep.
I wouldn't discount it, but I don't expect it. I do think that the blindness, Pharazôn, I mean,
Exactly.
the perfect opportunity to say,
Because I don't think it would just be an injury for injury's sake. Like, I mean, it's effective in that scene. Like,
It's
you know,
it's
it's a
lovely
mile
from
since
a
we left
symbolic
the
standpoint.
yeah, and a mile since we left the smoke. There was that, oh crap, you know, that's a good moment of suspense. But I feel like it's got a longer play, and they're going to use it in different ways. And just seeing the terror and don't let anyone know,
Right.
that
Right.
that will factor
And
in.
there, I mean, I like that in her as leader, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, she's wanting to, to continue on, terrified but strong as a leader still, and I like that. But yeah, no, it's clearly, there are clearly going to be trouble. So I feel like we're either going to get no Numenor or lots of Numenor in episode 8, because. Yeah.
I suspect no Numenor.
Yeah,
Or
I
a little,
ca-
a little
I think a
bit.
tiny bit. Like, I think we're going to have to see all of our main characters in the locations where they're going to pick up in season 2. So I feel like we're going to see the ship come into port, know that Pharazôn's being a little shifty, but that could literally just be like a side eye. You know, it doesn't have to be a ton of narrative. So I think everybody just has to geographically end up in the place where they're going to start
Well,
off
we
in
may
season 2.
we may need to see Elendil and Arian reunited.
Yeah, because we also need to know that she's up to something, because we haven't had much of her for many episodes.
We've
But
been
what
at
they
anything
gave
ever since
us,
they left in 5.
but what they gave us early on was kind of specific. Like, you can tell they're
Yes.
laying some foundations for her to be doing something. So I think
She's
they're going
totally
to
going to build the Temple of Morgoth.
So they're going to have to give us a bit more of her.
It's my prediction.
So what would make her turn to be? Because her dad's pissed off, and
I think that she's already in the pro Pharazôn direction. She was against it from the start, right? And this is just going to prove
stop
to
them from
her.
leaving.
The other thing is she's lost a mother.
Yeah.
So
Now lost a brother.
She well, we'll see when she finds out that he's
Yeah.
still alive, but death is on her mind.
The mortality. theme.
Mortality.
So anything that says, well, you know, this is how we're going to
Yeah.
stave off death.
It was clearly the preservation, like what was upsetting her. The reason she was calling after Pharazôn and everything seemed clearly to be like, I am afraid to lose.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, my brother and my father. And so, yes, seeing her as a focal point of the increasing mortality anxiety in Numenor, I think would be interesting and does seem likely. That I could even begin with her and then sort of spread to Pharazôn in a sense from her, I think would be really interesting. But yeah, so I'm trying to, as far as like where that plot is going to end, the oath of Muriel and Galadriel saying, and the elves will be ready, felt like it could have been the end of season 1. Like, we could not return to Numenor at all, and the Numenor plot line would be not in a happy place, but it would be in a good place for the end of the season. I agree. I too would like to see. I don't want to leave Elendil where we left him.
Yeah.
That would feel
But you
difficult.
could.
We could.
Yeah,
It'd be
you
hard.
really
It'd be
could.
painful.
But it's not a loose end just dangling. We kind of know where he is and
Right.
what's being set up.
Right. But I feel like if we're going to go back to Numenor, we have to do I don't know. I kind of feel like if we go there, we have to do the thing. How is Miro going to respond? What's Pharazôn going to do in response? We could even return. It's possible. We could even return to find Tar Palantir dead.
Yeah.
And then the question of the succession comes up right away,
Yeah.
and Muriel's blind, and Pharazôn is king by the end of episode 8. Could very well happen.
Yep.
And then we don't know, and that's the end. And then we don't know what's coming after that. So I kind of feel like it's all or nothing.
That
on
would
the
make
Numenor
sense
story.
too, because then that whole oath of we will be back means nothing because she wasn't in charge. So then
Right.
that whole idea is immediately
But she's
threatened.
not going to give up on her oath,
Right.
and so she's going to be working for that. And
Right.
it'll be, yeah, yeah. No, and who knows whether that even then becomes something that then brings Anarion and the faithful in. Like, is she gonna go to the faithful, when Pharazôn, when her influence and power in mainstream Numenor drops to zero, basically, after Pharazôn becomes king? Is she gonna go to, to the faithful and I don't know.
The arc I'm curious about and would like to hear your thoughts on is Gil-galad. Where do we think he needs to get to before season 2? Because this is a different Gil-galad than we all expected.
Yeah,
so
it is.
When are we going to start to see the one that we know?
I think so. I don't know when the Forging of the Rings is going to happen, when the realization of the Sauron. Well, he may already, because of the eruption, be thinking that Sauron's back. I suspect his attitude to Galadriel is going to be the big change for him,
Yes.
possibly in episode 8.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's exactly what Ibrahim was asking. What conversation do we anticipate between Gil-galad and Galadriel?
Yeah.
I think it could be, as Ibrahim was suggesting. I mean, on the one hand, you could say she was already in trouble for defying the will of the High King before, and now, what she's done is an order of magnitude higher than that.
And I think he'll still be upset about that.
Yeah.
But I think he will realise now, whether it's just because of Erodruin or because of something else that happens, that she was right all along.
Yeah, I think, well, also, the other thing that I can't help but remember is the episode 5 thing, when he explained very briefly to Elrond why he sent Galadriel away. That he says that he thought that by sending Galadriel away,
Yes.
they could stop the corruption. Like it would prevent the corruption of the trees spreading more.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember that.
What? No. What?
Yeah, he said that.
You just block your ears whenever
Apparently.
Gil-galad
What?
speaks. Yeah.
No,
You're crazy, Gil-galad.
yeah. It was one of the things that he said that I disbelieve.
Yeah.
That is, that I disbelieve that he's right about. He said something like that, but he said it in order to set up saying, but it didn't work, right? But it still kept happening. That didn't fix it. And so therefore, I don't think when Galadriel comes back, he's going to be like, oh, well, there
again.
we go.
Yeah.
Right, there we go. I mean, I think that he, especially since if Elrond is there, we're going to come back to the first oath that was made in the show. Well, second if you count Galadriel's taking up the oath of Finrod. But that happens quasi off stage and in flashback,
Yeah.
right? But Elrond's oath, which was a very serious oath that he took, that if Galadriel turned out to be right, that he would, never stop the fight. And, so that is clearly going to come into play. Elrond is clearly going to be very firmly on Galadriel's side, I think.
I
when
look
it
forward to
comes
that
this.
conversation too. I want to see the reunion
Yes.
of Galadriel and Elrond because clearly they're
Yes.
very deep, dear friends, and I want more of that relationship building.
Yes, yes.
I also think that will soften Galadriel. I think that's going to give us that other perspective that we haven't had a lot of opportunity to see from her.
Well, and I am fascinated to see how her whole shift of perspective that we saw in episode 7. I mean, she really turned a corner.
Can I make
Yeah.
a prediction?
Sure.
Yeah.
I wonder if whatever Celebrimbor has cooked up
Yeah.
will require. Am I allowed to say the name of the episode tonight?
Sure.
It's alloyed.
Alloyed. Alloyed.
Alloyed, as in to do with an alloy.
To do with
of metal.
alloys. But it's the past
Okay.
participle.
Yes.
Alloyed.
Yeah.
Yes. I wonder.
Huh.
Okay.
Okay. So my theory is that whatever Celebrimbor has cooked up will need not just mithril,
Yeah.
but will need other metals
Yeah.
that have seen the light of the Valar.
Oh, he's going to want to melt
Okay.
down her dagger.
And they're going to need her dagger, and that's going to be the final giving up the revenge.
Oh, wow.
Right, handing it over.
Is her giving up
Wow.
Finrod's dagger.
Wow.
That's my
Okay.
prediction.
Interesting.
There you go.
We're-
You heard it here
Put,
first.
put that on your bingo card.
We're going to melt down Galadriel's dagger. Wow, that would be. Yeah.
Can't say her dagger crossed my mind that much. So yeah, that makes sense though.
It's. I mean, it has been set up to
I mean, I think we're going to see a definite decision. We're making rings by the end of this episode. It's called Rings of Power, and we've yet to have rings. So I feel like that has to be set up.
Yeah, that we were talking about last week.
Yeah.
I still think there's no question. We don't have to produce a Ring of Power by the end of season 1. It's okay if we don't actually have a ring.
I don't want us to, but I think we will.
There may be, and I'm not gonna. I wouldn't if the final scene is like somebody holding up a ring.
No,
or
I
something
feel like the
like that.
closing shot's going to be like the metal going into the mold
It depends
or something.
which.
You know?
It depends which it is, right? So
Which ring?
So the other aspect of this is where are we at in terms of the Anatar in a Region?
Yeah, exactly.
If Anatar's already been working in a Region with Celebrimbor,
Yes.
then we could be quite far along in our ring making.
Yes.
Yeah.
The craft, I mean, it's to when they start doing the Rings of Power.
Yeah.
So it's possible that they've started the craft of the
Yes.
rings. I think that. Well, do we think that Anatar's going to be
Yes.
Revealed.
in episode 8?
Yeah.
I do. That's what I'm expecting.
As having been
and
in
hoping for.
been in a Region for quite some time already.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would also solve. I mean, I don't think they can keep up this Who's Sauron game for much longer.
No.
I think they're going to have to reveal that before season 2. So that would make sense
Yeah.
to show us
I
a big
couldn't
bad.
help but notice in the second episode that we see Celebrimbor, when he's in a Region, when he seems very disturbed. He's distracted. He plays that role almost exactly the same way that Ian Holm plays Bilbo when he's under the influence of the ring. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if that was deliberate.
That's interesting.
That'd be nice.
That he's distracted because he's already
already
under the
under the spell.
influence of Sauron
In
or
some
Anatar.
sense.
That'd be a fun scene study.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
I even think he says something along the lines of, "It's a funny thing," or he says some line that's
Yes.
almost
That's
exactly
really
like
reminiscent
Bilbo's.
of that.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought of that
Yeah,
connection,
neither.
but you're right. Those are very similar. Yes, to the scene when Bilbo realizes the ring is still in his pocket.
Yes.
Right.
Mhm.
In,
Yes.
in the film.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, that's very interesting. And by the way, to those
playing that
watching, no, I have not seen the clip that was dropped today. I am
Not
I've not-
engaging
I've
with
not
any
made
of
reference to
that.
it.
There-
I am avoiding it.
I've mostly just seen all the conversation about how many spoilers are in all the content that has been dropped today, and I have no interest in that.
And for me, it's not even about spoilers. It's like if I have to choose between seeing video clips without context now or video clips with context in 9 hours, I'm going to wait 9 hours.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal to me.
So I've deliberately not given my prediction based on
yes.
on the Vanity
that.
Fair.
Yes.
Yeah. I have
Yeah.
another prediction, but I've put it on Twitter with a Trop Spoilers tag. People can look
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I like trailers when there's nothing else. Like when it's 6 months before the show and all we have are trailers. It's fun to watch the trailers and think about that. But in the middle of the show, I am not interested in trailers.
To that point, I think that's going to be really interesting too. What are we going to get after this episode wraps and before season 2 starts? Like, do you think they have little bits that they're going to trickle out to keep us engaged? Do we have...
Before we get to that, can I just ask, do you think we're going to find out who the stranger is in episode 8?
So on the one hand, yes, in this, I think there's going to be some kind of resolution to that plot. I don't think it's still going to be mystery upon mystery afterwards.
I feel like I always wait for Corey to answer, be like, I don't know, what does he think? But I'm like, I don't think they're going to tell us everything. But
No,
I
don't
think
think they're going to tell us.
I feel like there's going to be a resolution.
Anybody knows everything.
It's like what I've been saying about Sauron, and in particular the Halbrand equals Sauron thing is, I suspect what gets revealed in episode 8 is not going to be easily settle that question. I think there are going to be people that go, I was right, and people that go, no, you weren't. You were wrong. I was right.
I don't know if they would leave that hanging. I don't know. I think we're going to have some resolution, some like, okay, but there's going to be a lot of new questions. But that'll be more about his journey rather than who he is. Like, what's his intention? Where's his movements? What's he after? What are those stars? You know, all those things.
Yeah.
I think we'll know a bit more about that. So, like, his actual push and not who he is.
But yet the problem is there's literally nobody in that entire plot line to give exposition.
That's true.
Yeah.
Who's going to say? Who's going to be like,
But But
I mean, is it going to be like, I'm a blue wizard? Like, nobody can say that
no, but
phrase
he's
if he
journeying
were be.
somewhere. So
journeying
he
somewhere.
could then, arrive somewhere and maybe someone else is there that can give context, or he does something that shows us.
Well, which I think he's been doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's to some extent, it doesn't feel to me like a huge mystery. I mean, yeah, like, is he Gandalf or not? I guess is still unresolved.
Are we really still?
I don't see any real. I don't know. I mean, he looks wizardly, and therefore, and I mean, if you think about this, right? Of all of the things we ever see, if you take the things that wizards do in Middle Earth, and you put them all into one pot, Gandalf did 95% of them.
Sure.
Right. So if you make him act wizardly, he's going to be acting like Gandalf, 95% of the time.
Yeah.
So the mere fact that he resembles Gandalf in some ways, to me, I mean, that could mean that he's Gandalf, but it could simply mean he's a wizard because
I also don't
Gandalf is our wizard.
Yeah, and I don't feel like that payoff would really pay off. Like, if you tell me that's Gandalf, I'll go, okay. It doesn't feel like, ooh.
I agree. It does not feel like it's building to a big reveal about that, or that it would. And yeah. So maybe. I mean, it's possible. Could he remember his own name or something?
That could be.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That may be the
Yeah.
reveal.
You know, that could be the reveal.
Or the mystic finally speaks and it's his name because he knows who he is.
Right.
So maybe that guy, that's the
Conceivably.
first time they use language is to actually identify who he is.
It's possible. That's possible.
We'll see.
But yeah, so I'm expecting some kind of resolution, especially certainly resolution. Because the thing that most needs resolution is his relationship with Nori and the Harfoots.
Yep.
Right.
And the Harfoots was the other one where it's like, we don't really need more from them plot-wise. We know where they're going, but we do need to see what the next step is, and that is their pursuit, is the stranger. So that will resolve that storyline as well.
And of course, some kind of, with the, mystics, cultists, some kind of, I don't know where that's leading exactly. It doesn't have to be totally resolved, obviously. We need, like, the cultists to all die or something and have that be finished. But something that would indicate, so that we know
their motivation. Big arc has to take off by the end of this episode. It doesn't have to, I don't think anything's going to be resolved. Hopefully it's like comfortably ended, so we're intrigued. It's not left hanging, but I feel like everybody's big arc has to take off.
Well, let's come back to the question you'd started asking, which, what are we going to do for the next 2 years? What are we going to...
Right.
We'll see what trickles out from that, but
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, film-wise, like, what content have they got that's going to kind
Well,
of
they're
keep
filming
all
right
of us?
now, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they can't have too much to release, you wouldn't think.
But there might be little snippets or something,
Maybe.
but I also don't think they're going to reveal much, because part of the success of season 1, I think, has been the asking questions and that curiosity. So
Right.
I don't think they would carry that through a season break. Oh, we'll see.
Yeah. JJ, I'm going to be really interested to see about if there's a fiddle involved, the internet is going to explode. Explode.
What's this?
If there's a fiddle. The Man on the Moon thing.
Man in the
Oh,
Moon.
okay.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
That one.
If one
They
of the-
have made odd references to a connection to the moon.
I
Yeah,
like it.
a lot of
I
them.
like it. I mean, the
If
idea,
you're looking for that conspiracy there, you will find the
Oh, yeah.
clues.
the idea that this whole sequence is going to be thousands of years later, the origin of will be only remembered in Hobbit legend as the Man in the Moon story. I love that idea. So any kind of Easter eggs they want to embed with that, I'm down for it. I still think the idea of Tilion himself descending to Earth for some reason and doesn't make any, apart from the fact that he is not acting the least bit. Tilion's a hunter. The stranger is not a hunter, right? I mean, it's just this. Even if you ignore the fact that what on earth is he doing and who's driving the moon and whatever, So, I know it's clearly not Tilion himself. But the connection to the Man in the Moon, I love the connection to the Man in the Moon. It's phenomenal. So yeah, if there is a fiddle, people are going to lose it.
What about Adar?
Adar.
What do you think
Oh,
we're?
man.
Yeah,
what are
we
we
haven't-
gonna?
that's a good
Yeah.
point. We haven't
What are
talked
we
about
gonna do
Adar
with
at all.
him? Where do you think
He's-
he's gonna be?
He's in day one of his retirement, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right from his perspective.
He's given his children a
Well,
home.
Okay, except when and how does he become a god? He was planning that. That was like.
Did he mean he would become a god, or that he would be viewed
Or
by his children
as a god.
He's
Okay.
legacy would be godlike.
Godlike.
It would be very Adar-esque for him to be thinking just from like an Uruk perspective, right? So as the one who blotted out the sun and provided a home, the orcs of future generations will remember him as the god of the orcs.
Yeah.
Do you think he's going to survive this episode? Because if he died and the big bad then stepped in, we'd have a transition.
Kill him and why?
If he's competition?
No, but I mean, who? Like, are the survivors of the Southlands going to attack Mordor? And if not them, is Galadriel going to bring Halbrand and his septic wound up there, get healed, resolve the Gil-galad story, and then come back down from Eregion
a lot to ask
to
from
Mordor
one episode.
in episode 8? I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
I think we have to wait and see
Yeah.
Mordor construct Barad-dûr,
Yeah.
make and
Kick
forge
him
the One
out.
Ring.
And we're not there yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Adar's so good, I don't want him to be gone
No.
yet. Yeah,
No,
we need that to carry through.
I think I'm done.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing else that I mean, as an antagonist, clearly Halbrand and also in a sense Galadriel have, though I think, let me finish my sentence, have unfinished business with Adar. Though I think that Galadriel's unfinished business with Adar probably involves like forgiveness or something. I mean, like Adar was with her on her worst day.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
Yes.
And his storyline was so important for us to
Yes.
see that other perspective too.
Yes.
That, yeah, I feel like we need to spend more time with that, of seeing the reasons he's doing what he's doing.
Yep. Yeah, I think that he stays. Even it would not surprise me at all if he. Oh, okay. How about this? Adar's future trajectory is to follow up what he was saying and to become the antagonist of Sauron. When Sauron wants to return and claim Mordor and use that as the center of his, but he wants Mount Doom.
That's what I'm
and he's gonna
thinking. When you
claim
say
it.
like who's going to do it, I'm like, he is.
Right,
But not yet.
But then, notice Adar and the refugees would now be on the same side against Sauron, and so I'm not saying they're going to reconcile and all become the closest of friends, right? But it would be interesting if there were opportunities actually for Adar and like Arondir and Isildur to work together against Sauron.
One thing that I've heard a couple of people remark is during the last alliance,
I was going to say.
it said that all groups other
both
than the
sides.
elves,
Yeah.
other than
on
the
both
elves,
sides.
were on both sides.
I hadn't thought of that. Yes. So we could get orcs on both sides.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be amazing.
I mean, think of those alliance ties and
Yeah.
the pools of loyalty.
Oh,
and
wow.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
Wow.
I think you blew his mind a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's just that's being like, well, I was just kind of making that up. But
There you
yeah,
go.
there you go, supporting my wild theory about a future alliance between, but because if not an active alliance, at least a sort of like we have a common enemy.
Yeah, I was going to say my enemy's
situation.
enemy is
Exactly,
my friend.
yeah. And so, but that also leading to an opportunity. I don't know that Galadriel and Adar need to be reconciled exactly, but I where that was left, that's not.
There's more.
That's not okay.
There's more for them.
Yeah. So
I think it's
having
such a
them be
great
into
scene.
that kind of place would be. So I can't see a fight against Adar being a plot line in episode 8. I mean, obviously the Southland, but they're not there yet. Again, there's no way that the survivors of the eruption are going to be rallying an invasion. of
We
Mordor.
may not see Adar.
No,
in
we may
episode
not. We may not. I think
I hope we do though.
an episode without Adar is.
But like
is,
that closing
tough.
shot of 7 though was so good. You know, like
Yeah.
he had established what he had planned to establish. We could end there, and I wouldn't be left hanging. I just want to see more of him because I think his character is really well developed.
Yes.
But there's others that are not as well developed that we need to spend time with, so
Right.
we care about them into
And
season
that,
2.
that last scene with Mount Doom in the background,
Yeah.
I've heard multiple non-book readers, film watchers only, for whom the penny dropped
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
exact moment. That was the moment where they're like,
That's
Mordor.
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 Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then you get the Southlands wiped away. I'm like, we get it now. Yeah.
See, I don't know. I liked the title thing,
Oh yeah.
and the reason
I didn't dislike it. I was just kind of rolling my eyes
Him
at
saying
it.
the word would have been much worse, in my opinion.
Much
cheesier.
You mean?
Not just cheesier, but also
Telling, not showing.
coming back to the language thing. It's not his name for it. It's so
Right.
just
Yeah.
I would have had a problem with it.
Right. Right. I shall call it the Black Land. That's what I shall name it. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But no, the way that the way that they've been using map labels all along, you know, and the ties to the map,
It worked.
yeah, I kind of like that. And as you say, let's actually draw, because in a sense, it doesn't matter what Adar calls it,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Yeah.
No, nobody cares.
No.
Nobody cares what Adar's name
Calls
for
it home. He
He
just
calls it
calls it
home.
home.
He calls
Call
it
it Fred, whatever.
exactly. But that's not what matters.
Yeah.
What matters is that this is so that the putting of the word on the screen is not just a reveal. It's like a prophecy, right? It tells us what is coming. It's a pointer to the future, but it's a pointer to the future that would have been awkward to put in anybody's mouth. Wait, except Galadriel already said it. She said, "This Shadowland," which is
She
also
does.
a near translation of the word Mordor.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I like that.
That's
I'm like,
nice.
oh,
Yeah,
little,
that's a
little,
good
little
setup.
Mordorian Easter egg there in the middle of the episode. It was her first conversation with Theo, I think. She called
Well, I mean,
it the Shadowland.
you can imagine that's how the name came about. The
Yeah.
elves were just referring to it as
That's what they called
the
it.
Shadowland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
dark place. But yeah.
Yeah.
I think we'll see more Theo to see what his trajectory is, but we're kind of in good shape there. I think the only other one we don't really know much about is Waldreg, and I can't say I care that much.
Well, he was with Adar. He was the one starting the, Hail Adar
Yeah.
chants at the end.
I kind of feel like his role is complete, though. Like, I don't know if we're going to need to see much more from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a red shirt now.
Exactly.
He's done. He's done. Yeah, he's played his role.
Yeah.
Did you see that meme? I love that meme. Meme that showed two pictures of Waldreg, and it says, "I want to hear more about Waldreg. Sauron wouldn't have gotten far without him, would he?"
I've not seen that. That's wonderful.
Brilliant. One of my favorite Rings of Power memes.
That's great.
Yet.
We got to start collecting them.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Oh.
But anyway, yeah. So anyhow, yeah. Theo also, again, is another one of those people that I'm not sure. We could get nothing. Theo holding up Galadriel's sword, saying strength to the Southlands.
He has made that step into the next.
Roll credits.
Yeah.
I'm ready for season
Yeah.
2. I wouldn't object. Like, I'm not feeling I
Yeah.
need more from Theo, but I wouldn't be surprised if I did get it.
But that has absolutely established his next trajectory. He's taken up a sword. He's
Yeah.
stepped into, being a grown-up next
Yeah.
round.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's setting himself up to become a king of
Yeah.
man to receive a ring.
I still think he's going to become a bad guy, and I think that's going to be because of Bronwyn's death. I don't know if we're going to see that in episode 8, but I feel like that's going to be what makes him turn, because he's going to be tempted.
But it would be more plausible for him to receive a ring if he has a major role as
yes.
a
Yes.
position of power.
Position of
Position
power.
of power.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't think there's stuff to resolve in the sense of, like, I want to see Pelargir. I want to get some kind of a sense of, because again, I think what we are seeing is Proto-Gondor there now. And so I do think we need to get some sense of here's how this is going to move and develop, so that even when we come back and find Pelargir now a thriving town, we have some basis of understanding how it's composed of Númenóreans and Southlanders together and whatever. But I don't see any tension to be resolved there. Like, it's just, let's see them set up their homes.
I think that's just the
and
geography
stuff.
thing. We just need
Yeah.
to know where they are.
Yeah, know where they are, see how they're, and some, like, who's in charge. Halbrand left, right? Hail the king, farewell to the king, and
Good luck.
Good luck with that. And now we've got Bronwyn in a position of leadership, Arondir, who seems perfectly content to be her right hand in leadership. But now we've got Isildur and the Númenóreans there, and how's that going to work out? But again, this is not like there's going to be a battle kind of tension, right? We've got
That's bits resolved. yeah.
conflict in the Harfoot thing with the mystics, right? We've got conflict in the Gil-galad storyline with
Yeah.
Anatar and the fading.
Well, that's the timeline we
diminishing and
spent
everything
the
else.
least time with. We
Yes.
had a full episode of the Southlands and Numenor in that battle, and a little bit of the Harfoots and Stranger last time. So we have some progression on those, but we haven't spent time with the Elves in a couple episodes. I feel like we need a lot more with that
Yeah.
to set us up,
Yep.
which clearly is what we're going to get. But
Yeah. No, I bet you we're going to be very, well, not Linden, but very Eregian heavy, very elf
Elf
heavy.
heavy, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, we may get no Khazad-dûm. We may get no Adar.
sad.
We may only get a little bit
Harfoots.
of. Well, no, I expect
More
a bunch of
Harfoots?
Harfoots. I would think the.
A little bit of Numenor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit in or a lot of Numenor.
A lot
depending
of
on which way they
elves.
go, either a little bit or a lot.
Those are the two options.
They are. They are. Okay, I'm gonna predict we're gonna get Pharazôn crowned.
Okay.
It's my fearless prediction. I think we're gonna get our Pharazôn by the end of episode 8. And the reason I think that is that we have not seen Pharazôn since episode 5. And I think that just leaving him hanging is gonna be too much. And I think it makes sense pacing-wise for him to, at the end of season 1, take over. In season 2, right, have him, we're going to get the phase 2 colonial activities and stuff. We'll get some tension between, like, are the Numenorians going to be an enemy or an ally, right? We don't really know if we can count on them and what's going on until, of course, in the end, he is going to come in and pull their biscuits out of the fire during the war in Eriador, which is presumably season 3, right? But season 2 will be him establishing his power and stuff with Elendil and Daarian and internal conflict with the faithful, right? Active persecution of the faithful in Numenor, right? The outlawing of that, and we're gonna, like, all that stuff might be the focus of season 2 before we turn back to Middle Earth from Numenor in season 3. But I think it sets that up well. If so, I'm predicting Pharazôn will be crowned
I don't know if I go straight
in
to
6 hours.
Yeah. And checked.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll see him fully crowned because that feels like a lot to happen in an episode, but it absolutely could be pulled off if they wanted to. I definitely think we're
Well,
going to
but
see
if
Pharazôn plotting. I think we're
Yeah.
definitely going to see a
Or
mistrust.
sceptered, I should say sceptered.
Sceptered,
not
yes.
crowned.
Crowned,
Yeah.
yes.
But I definitely think we'll see him plotting to take that role on, if not fully on sceptered.
Yeah.
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 So, Tar Palantir, dead.
Dead.
Dead on arrival
Yeah.
of the
DOA,
others.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
That's my guess. Or dies soon after arrival, right? And then Muriel lives in his tower.
Yeah.
Blind Muriel is living in his tower.
Yep. Under similar
Under
circumstances.
similar circumstances. Yeah, exactly. That's my expectation. Solution with a Harfoot plot.
Yep.
Again, mostly the reuniting of them with the stranger and a clearer sense of what the purpose is.
Yep.
Which will emerge from the confrontation with the mystics.
Yep.
And then something.
some rings.
I bet you we're going to get Durin.
Which
Young. Durin the Younger. I think that the
'Cause he
artist
has a new
formerly known as
opportunity.
Prince Durin is going to be present with Elrond. He'll be in the elf story, like episode 5 when he was in Linden. So he'll be in the elf context. But I suspect we'll get him. I mean, that last rather ominous conversation with Disa could very well, again, that could have been
great
a,
conversation.
Credits roll, end of season.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we'd be left.
But I suspect we'll see him, but I don't think he'll be a focal point. And I think that Elrond is going to be the.
Felvin, I mean, I'm able to look at this with fresh eyes because I am not part of them.
I think that's
Ooh,
going
yeah.
to lead him to
Yeah.
be the one to figure things out
Yep.
and either uncover Anatar's presence or
Alert them to it.
yeah.
We got to wrap up, guys.
We do. We're over time. Okay. Well,
Dang. Thanks for
that's-
joining
hey,
us.
look at that.
That was
Loved it.
really fun.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
Yeah, like being here.
Yeah. So it's not going to usually. Not only are we not usually together, but
We
to
get
have
him too.
to have a special guest physically with us is pretty
It's thrilling.
unusual. Absolutely awesome. So just so for folks who joined late, We will be doing the watch party tonight. We're going to be doing a live watch party here in the studio. So we're going to have a live audience. I will be streaming the watch party, and we'll sync that up with our watching here. I won't have audio on because otherwise you'll get audio bleed from the room and everything. So I'll have no audio on during the show, but I will have the camera on.
So that just means if you scoff or roll your eyes, you have to be very dramatic about it. So we all know.
I suspect that will happen. So yes, if you're looking to see our reactions, you'll see our reactions on screen. And then afterwards, Maggie and I will stand in the front and
do a bit
discuss with folks in the room. We'll also be working to take comments and stuff from. We'll be broadcasting this on the Signum Twitch channel, so that's twitch.tv/SignumU is where you can find that.
And
at
that's
midnight tonight. We will
Eastern.
They tend to drop the episode a little bit before midnight, but we start at midnight so that it's clear when we're starting for everybody.
And then tomorrow we're noon on Twitter Spaces.
Noon on Twitter Spaces.
Yeah. And that's it for a little bit. We'll be filming Rings and Realms, but you'll see that next week.
Exactly. So then we'll be hard at work on Rings and Realms.